Hey everyone, welcome back to another lesson. So let's make this even more advanced. As I said, we're going to get this really advanced stuff. So make sure you're familiar with everything we've talked about so far and you have a good understanding of it before we move on, because we have a few other kind of complicated or confusing really stuff to talk about. Because, you know, when it comes to else statements and if and else statements, they're not that complicated to understand, but they can be really confusing when you like put them all in each other and all that stuff. So in the previous lesson, we talked about a nested if and else statement. So the idea was that you could put another if and else statement inside another one. So if the first condition runs, you go check for the second one, and the second one runs, you run the code, or if it doesn't, you run the second if statements else, essentially, right? Or even if the first one doesn't run, you just go all the way down and just run the else statement of the first or layer, essentially. So one of the things is that, let's say you want to do something a little bit different. All right, so we talked about this thing that we're building here. So it's a pilot school test, and we just want to qualify people. So we're asking for their height. If they are below 150, for example, they can't join. If they are over 150, we're going to check for their age. If they're over 16, they can join. If they're not over 16, they can't, right? Essentially under 16. So one question. So what if we want to do something more? What if you want to make sure that they're not over 80, right? So, one way that you can do this, you can just add more if statements in there, okay? But there is actually a more cleaner way to do this. So let's say we want to ask if they're over 80 years old. That's like too old, right, for you to be a pilot. So we're going to say, oh, okay, if they are over 80 years old, they can't join the school. But if they're not over 80 years old, they can, meaning that they're over 16 and under 80. So that's like the age we're looking for, essentially, for example, in this. So how do you actually do this? So let's actually talk about if and else statements a little bit more. So we started with the basic ones, the condition. If the condition runs, you do this. If it doesn't, you do this. And then we got to a more advanced one, which is the nested statements. So the idea with this was that, if this first condition runs, you're going to go to the second one. If it doesn't, if the first condition doesn't run, you're just immediately going to go to the else. But again, it's just nested, right? It's like a folder inside a folder, essentially. You can imagine it that way. So if the first one runs, you go to the second one. If the second one runs, you run this code. If it doesn't run, you run the else inside this, right? So very simple. Again, I hope you understood this. But now we're going to talk about Elif statements. So the idea with an Elif statement is that you want to check for a few things. Now this makes if and else statements just a little bit cleaner, but also there's just a different situation. Because in this case, in the nested if and else statements, we checked for this, and if it doesn't run, we immediately going to end the program, right? But in an Elif statement, what we do is we check for the first one, and if this doesn't run, it checks for another one. And again, you can have many Elif conditions. So this way you have multiple things to check, but just one end to it. So you don't have a lot of else's, So just let's say we want to check if there's a certain age, and then let's say below certain age or over certain age. So you have multiple conditions, you're checking for multiple conditions, and then using a single else to just answer it if it doesn't pass, essentially. So that's pretty much how an Elif statement works. So how do you actually program this? Now keep in mind, Elif statements are on the same indent level as if and else, so just something to remember. It's very important. Okay, you don't want to indent it in like this, for example. That's just the wrong way to do it. You want to keep it on the same level as your if statement. Now in our complicated code that we have here, we got one if statement and two if statements. So now in this case, I want to make it a little bit intentionally confusing for you so you can actually understand it. So obviously if you wanted to do an Elif for this one, we would do it on this level, right? But because we're doing Elif for this, we are going to do it on this level. So this Elif is going to be a little bit indented, right? So here's how we do it. after the print, this is the command of the if you remember, think about it this way. This is the if, and this is the command of it. There's an elif, essentially, right? So we're just gonna enter, and we're gonna enter our elif. So elif, and we're gonna say age. In this case, we want to check if they're greater than 80, greater or equal 80. And if that's the case, we're going to print, and again, as you see, when I press enter, it's going to send me already to the next indent. It's actually indented automatically. So it's going to say, I'm going to say print, you are too old to be a pilot. Sorry. So that's it. So I see and one of the things I want you to remember, you can have multiple elifs. Essentially, you can check for unlimited amounts of conditions, and then if they don't work out, you just go to an else. That's it. Makes it really simple, makes it really cleaner, right? And again, remember that elif statements are actually different from the nested if and else statements, because a nested if and else statement is just like it checks for a few things and it has different responses based on each condition, right? But again, this is useful when you want to check for multiple things and just have a single response to it if it doesn't work out, or all that. So just different ways and different like situations you use this. So guys, let me know if you have any questions about this. Okay, this is very important for you to understand. Do not move on to the next lesson if you're like not fully understanding this. That's just something I strongly recommend, because if and else statements can get really confusing and you want to make sure you understand it clearly. So let's run this code real quick and let's see how it works. All right, so let's run it. And what's your height, for example, because I'm 190. What's your age? I'm going to say 20. Let's make sure this elif statement actually fires. We're going to say 95, for example, and it's going to say you're too old to be a pilot. Sorry. See, and that's it. That's where the program ended. So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to get you familiar with elif statements. Very important and very useful stuff. I'm going to leave a few resources for you in the resources section. First one is going to be this PDF file, which is going to explain the elif conditions and everything. So that's there. And also I'm going to leave the final file for you so you can take a look at it as well. This replet file, you can fork it for yourself. And also don't forget to let me know if you have any questions. This is a very important thing to understand. I want you to make sure you fully understand this before we go to the next thing that we're going to talk about, which is when it comes to if and else statements, which is another very important concept. All right, guys, let me know if you have any questions. If not, I'll see you in the next lesson.